Okay, hi. We are Team smartAPI, and our slogan is interconnecting web APIs through smarter descriptions. So I'm Vlad, this is Grant and Dmitry and Chunlei, and Michel had to leave this morning, unfortunately. So basically what we're tackling is that, there's a lot of data out there, there are a lot of APIs out there. How do we connect them all to answer the questions that we have to answer? So, there are some collections of, repositories of data sets and repositories of APIs, but, how can we actually connect these together, and ideally in a sort of machine interpretable way so that we can just ask the question and hopefully get an answer. Here's just a use case is if we have conditions such as hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which involves 20 different genes. How can we get from the genes to the proteins to the drugs to potential other diseases that such drugs can treat, for example. If we can describe the APIs better in a way that machines can also understand, then we may have a better chance at connecting and answering questions efficiently. But what's the problem with annotation of APIs with metadata? Well, it's tedious, it's time consuming, there's a lack of standards in this area, and there are also a lot of heterogeneity in the data types that are consumed and produced by different APIs. So our vision is that through rich semantic annotation of APIs, we can connect them seamlessly, and these descriptions can be discoverable and searchable and indexable to help further annotation of more and more services in the future. So we broke down the steps into 5 steps. So first we need to define a proper sort of metadata standard to sort of adequately describe an API and all its component services as completely as possible, but without sort of over-describing and burdening the people who create APIs. Next is we need a relatively easy-to-use interface so that they can easily annotate and create these descriptions and attach them to, well, add them to our repository. Next is that in our repository, we will ideally index all of these elements from both the input and output areas of the APIs and services, and also use this information to sort of more rapidly and more intelligently help future API creators annotate their APIs. And finally, we'd like to show all these APIs that are out there and connect them and visualize them in a way that's easily interpretable by humans and machines. So, sorry for the busy slide, but basically we looked at different existing repositories and metadata standards out there, such as Biocatalog. We had 2 use case APIs from Chunlei, myVariant and mygene.info. Michel is also part of the W3C Healthcare and Life Sciences Dataset Description group, where they defined a set of metadata standards for experimental data sets, but not for APIs, which is what we set out here to do. And finally, we sort of mapped this, we created a JSON-LD model with API as sort of the main description, and one API can contain multiple services, and each of these services can have input and output parameters. So here's an example of the API section of the JSON-LD file. So you can see here's the unique resource identifier of the service, of the API, free text description, and metadata about the publisher and documentation and source code URLs, for example, as well as keywords that you can associate with the API. And as I said before, each API can have multiple services. So beneath this, you can have an array of different services, each also with its set of metadata. Here is where you can define input parameters and output fields for the services. for example, in this, actually we should start from here. If the symbol is, for example, output by one service, and we can type it properly with, proper RDF vocabulary, IDS, then in other services we can look for input parameters that take the same kind of data type. And then, if the machines can understand this, then we can connect them automatically. Yeah, so that's what I basically described. So the idea is that we will also try to automate the generation of these JSON-LD descriptions from Bio to RDF, which contains 35 biomedical databases already converted into RDF. So that would help us pre-populate our repository with more data than we can have over this weekend. And I'm just going to go through the very rough interface that we have for annotation of APIs and services. We wanted it to be as lightweight as possible and as dynamic as possible, so we just used JavaScript and jQuery. We found this nifty jQuery library called Alpaca Forms, which allows you to define a JSON schema and generate the form dynamically. So this is actually all powered by a JSON schema document in the, and it's not hard-coded elements. So you can see you can enter your IRI for identifier API, you can enter, and then it will validate automatically for you. So yeah, well, let's fill it with dummy data. So it just generates random strings, but the key thing is that you can change the number of fields as necessary, and you can add multiple services to each API as many as your API has. Here's where you can define multiple input parameters. As you can see, it is pretty long form, but it is dynamic and it's structured, and at the end of the day, it does create a valid JSON-LD document, which can be displayed on the side. So then we send this JSON-LD document via AJAX call to our backend. Right. Okay, right, so I'll just hand it over to Chunlei.
Sure, yeah, I'm gonna quickly go through what we have on the backend. And so once they send this to backend, this will save this JSON-LD document to database, and then send it to the Elasticsearch for the indexing. And then at the end, we can do something query like this. So if I go back to the slides. So this is the first API we have. It's basically JSON, return the JSON object to a registered API. And unfortunately, this is smartAPI.info is not going to work in the TSI in like a guest network. It's working like outside. I don't know why they block this. It's a scripts IT issue. So I don't know why it work from outside on your cell phone. It's not on Wi-Fi, but or you on your like a TSI internal Wi-Fi should work. It's live. It's deployed. So this will return all the information about this two web API. Yeah. Okay. This one is basically you can do the query. Once you have all this in, you can do the query. Say like this one is say, give me all the web APIs which input will support this HGNC symbol. So that will return you all the web API register. And this one, if you turn off this input equal to input parameter, basically give you all the API with the output contains HGNS symbol. That way we can do the interlinking between the multiple APIs. And yeah, if I do a like yeah, this looks like this. By default, which is the return what's the list of the input parameter for this and the list of the output parameter. Like this one right now is only matched my, which one is yeah, my gene.info API. So, okay. Now this one really like give you the idea like how you once we right now we only have 2 examples, but we are planning to importing more API annotation to the database so that you can do the query. Say if I start with a variant ID, and I want to get the like the associated gene and the associated gene protein family. So how we can link all the multiple web services to get all this kind of data. So this query basically gives you the paths. So from the variant ID, and I want to get back the PFAM data, PFAM information. So now click this link. It will give you do the query and show you the actual. This is going to be. Oh, this need to see. Yeah, show you how the paths you can use all these APIs to connect the API and from your variant ID all the way to the PFAM. So imagine if we load more annotated APIs, you can link them together and solve a lot of data issue instead of like manually parsing all these data files. So that I think is a very this is going to be a very typical use case for our system. Let's see. Okay, yeah. In terms of future direction, we want to add the auto suggestion to the API registration form. You can see it's a long form, and you almost definitely want some kind of auto suggestion. We want to add this based on the existing API, for example, from Biometrical website or other resources, which Michel actually has a lot of collection of this data ready to import. And we also want to import a lot of other services also from the existing resources, so that we can build a more useful like a path for user to getting all the kinds of data. So that's summarize our website and source code is in the GitHub, and that's basically our goal. You guys make the data to the API, and we make it smart, and ultimately we hope to make some breakthrough use this. Thank you.